What if I told you that the greatest barriers in your life are not the ones outside you, but the ones you've quietly built within your own mind? And that with God, every single one of them can be torn down. We live in a world obsessed with human potential, yet it constantly measures that potential by talent, resources, or luck. But there is a truth deeper than any self-help book will tell you. Human strength alone will always have limits. Faith, however, changes the equation. When you walk with God, you tap into a source of wisdom, strength, and creativity that transcends what the world believes is possible. You stop living inside the box of fear and failure, and you start living in the boundless space of divine possibility. This is not about blind optimism. It's about partnering with the creator of the universe to shape your character, expand your vision, and fulfill a purpose far greater than yourself. With God, you are no longer just growing. You are growing without limits. I can now turn this into a full motivational opening speech that flows naturally into your 4 key points. Let's begin with this idea: faith unlocks potential. Now, that's a phrase you've probably heard before, but most people treat it like a decorative slogan, something nice to put on a wall or post online. The reality is far more profound. Faith is not just a feeling of hope or a passive belief that things will work out. Faith, when it is real, is an active partnership with God that changes the way you see yourself in the world. It takes the raw material of your life, your talents, your limitations, your past, and reorients them under the conviction that you are capable of far more than you've dared to imagine. When you rely solely on your own intellect, discipline, or skill, you inevitably bump up against ceilings. You encounter situations that are beyond your knowledge, problems too large for your strength, or circumstances that seem completely outside your control. And when that happens, the typical human reaction is either to retreat into comfort or to push harder until exhaustion sets in. But faith offers a third way, a deeper way. It says, you are not the ultimate source of your power. You are connected to something infinitely greater, and in that connection, limits are redefined. Psychologically, this is transformative. When you truly believe that God is invested in your growth, your mindset shifts from one of survival to one of expansion. You begin to interpret challenges not as proof of inadequacy, but as invitations to discover a new dimension of strength that you didn't know you had. You become more willing to step into uncomfortable spaces because you understand that growth rarely happens where safety is guaranteed. That willingness is a direct consequence of faith. It frees you from the tyranny of self-preservation. And there's something paradoxical here. Faith doesn't remove the struggle, it reframes it. It's not that you suddenly avoid hardship, but rather hardship stops being a dead end. It becomes raw material for growth. When David faced Goliath, the victory wasn't in his own physical power. It was in the fact that he approached the battlefield with the unwavering conviction that God's purpose would prevail through him. That conviction unlocked courage, and that courage unlocked action. Philosophically, this touches on an essential truth: human potential is not a fixed quantity. It's expandable, but only under certain conditions. And one of those conditions is belief in a reality that transcends your immediate circumstances. Faith gives you a vantage point beyond the present moment. You start to see yourself not merely as you are, but as you could be, and you trust that God's guidance can bridge that gap. That vision pulls you forward with more force than fear can push you back. The danger is that many people underestimate what they could achieve because they've made the mistake of measuring themselves without factoring God into the equation. They've looked at the size of their resources and ignored the size of their source. When you do that, you settle for a smaller life. Not because you lacked ability, but because you lack the perspective that faith provides. So here's the challenge: stop asking, "Can I do this?" And start asking, "What could God do through me if I refuse to limit myself?" That single question changes the way you think, the way you act, and the way you live. And if you answer it with courage, you'll discover that your potential was never locked. It was simply waiting for faith to turn the key. The second truth we need to explore is this: with God by your side, challenges stop being mere obstacles and start becoming opportunities. This is not simply a motivational turn of phrase. It's a complete reorientation of how you experience life's difficulties. Most people approach hardship as something to be avoided or endured as quickly as possible. They see it as an interruption to the life they want, rather than as a vital part of the life they're meant to build. But if you truly believe God is present and active in your journey, then every challenge carries within it the potential to transform you. Now, I'm not suggesting that difficulties become pleasant simply because you have faith. Pain is still pain. Loss still hurts. Failure still stings. What changes is the meaning you assign to those experiences. Without God, struggle often feels senseless. It's just suffering for its own sake. But with God, that same struggle becomes part of a larger story, one in which even the darkest chapters contribute to the plot's resolution. That shift in perspective alters everything about how you face adversity. Psychologically, when you frame challenges as growth opportunities, your brain engages them differently. Instead of triggering only the stress response, the fight, flight, or freeze modes, it activates problem solving, creativity, and resilience. Faith amplifies this effect by giving you an anchor point beyond yourself. You're no longer just trying to survive the storm. You're trying to learn what the storm is meant to teach you, trusting that God would not allow it without a purpose. This reframing moves you from a posture of resistance to one of curiosity and engagement. Think about the stories of the greatest figures in history or scripture. None of them became who they were by avoiding difficulty. Joseph's betrayal by his brothers was a tragedy, but it was also the necessary road to becoming a leader who saved nations. Moses spent years in the wilderness, not as punishment, but as preparation. Even Christ himself faced rejection, betrayal, and suffering as part of the path to his ultimate victory. In each case, the challenge was not the end, it was the means. Philosophically, this reveals something essential about growth. It rarely comes from comfort. Comfort preserves what you already are. Challenge invites you to become something new. And when you face challenge with God, it's not simply about enduring until it's over. It's about being reshaped in the process. The heat that feels like it's destroying you may in fact be refining you, burning away what holds you back and forging you into someone who can handle the weight of greater responsibility and greater purpose. The danger is that without this perspective, hardship can harden you instead of strengthen you. You can become cynical, bitter, or fearful. But with God, you can allow difficulty to deepen your faith, expand your capacity, and sharpen your vision. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is God preparing me for?" And perhaps that's the question worth carrying forward. What if the very thing you're trying to escape right now is the thing God intends to use to equip you for the life you've been asking Him for? There's a temptation, once you've grown to a certain point, to slow down, to believe you've arrived or at least earned the right to rest on what you've already achieved. But the truth is, with God, growth is never meant to be a temporary project. It's a lifelong calling. Continuous self-improvement isn't about restlessly chasing perfection. It's about faithfully becoming the person God designed you to be, one deliberate step at a time. The idea is deceptively simple. If you're alive, you're still meant to grow. Yet in practice, it's difficult because growth requires confronting parts of yourself that you'd rather leave untouched. It means acknowledging where pride still lies, where fear still hides, and where complacency has quietly taken root. Faith pushes you into that uncomfortable work, not because God is trying to burden you, but because He refuses to let you settle for less than your full potential. He sees not only who you are, but also who you could be if you kept saying yes to His process. Psychologically, there's a danger in thinking growth has a finish line. The moment you stop actively developing, you begin to decline, maybe not immediately in visible ways, but internally, your capacity begins to shrink. The human mind, like the human spirit, thrives on challenge and learning. When you're committed to growth with God at the center, you anchor your development in something unshakable. You're not just chasing trends or personal ambitions. You're aligning yourself with a purpose that transcends your own understanding. That alignment keeps you from drifting into shallow, aimless improvement for its own sake. Consider how this works in practice. You might master a skill, overcome a bad habit, or heal from an old wound, but that's never the end. Each victory opens the door to the next level of responsibility. If you've grown in patience, you'll be placed in situations that test it further. If you've strengthened your leadership, you'll be entrusted with people and decisions that demand even greater wisdom. God uses your current growth as the training ground for the next. That's why stagnation is so dangerous. It leaves you unprepared for what's coming. Philosophically, continuous growth with God reflects the reality that we are finite beings serving an infinite creator. No matter how much you learn, how deeply you mature, there's always more to uncover about the world, about yourself, about the nature of truth. This is not a cause for discouragement, but for wonder. It means life will never run out of meaningful work for you to do, and God will never run out of ways to stretch and shape you. So the real question isn't whether you're growing fast enough. It's whether you're still growing at all. The moment you believe there's nothing left to refine, you've stepped out of alignment with the way God works. His intention has never been to make you comfortable. It's to make you capable of carrying the weight of the purpose He's placed in your hands. If you want to honor Him, don't just thank Him for how far you've come. Ask Him where He's taking you next. Because with God, the journey is endless, and so is the transformation. One of the most liberating truths you will ever grasp is that with God, you are not confined by the boundaries the world, or even your own mind, has set for you. Most people live within invisible walls. Some are built from fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of stepping into the unknown. Others are constructed from the opinions of others, societal expectations, or the weight of past mistakes. These walls feel permanent because they've been standing for so long, but they are not made of stone. They are made of belief, and belief can be changed. When you walk with God, you begin to see those walls for what they really are, illusions of limitation. That doesn't mean they don't feel real. They can feel unbreakable. But faith shifts your reference point. Instead of defining yourself by the conditions of your environment, you start defining yourself by the calling God has placed within you. And His call is never small. It will always push you beyond what feels safe, because only in that stretch will you discover the depths of what He has placed in you. Psychologically, this is critical. The human brain is wired to conserve energy and avoid risk, which means it naturally resists anything that feels uncertain. Without God, this self-preserving instinct can trap you in mediocrity, even if you're capable of so much more. But faith disrupts that wiring. It introduces a greater reason to act, a reason so compelling that fear no longer gets the final word. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if this is exactly what God created me to do?" That question dismantles limitations faster than any motivational speech ever could. Think of the stories that inspire us most. They are never about people who stayed within the lines. They are about those who stepped out. Noah building an ark in the desert, Abraham leaving his homeland without knowing the destination, Peter stepping out of the boat onto the water. None of them acted because they were certain. They acted because they trusted. The limit was never in their circumstances. It was in their willingness to believe that God's plan could carry them beyond the ordinary. Philosophically, this is where faith becomes an act of defiance. The world says, stay where you are, play it safe, don't want too much. But God calls you into the uncomfortable truth that you were made for more than survival. You were made for significance. That significance will not be realized inside the safe zone. It will be forged in the space where your weakness meets His strength. And here's the reality. If you don't actively challenge your boundaries, they will silently shrink over time until your life becomes smaller than your calling. But if you dare to walk with God beyond those walls, you'll discover that they were never meant to contain you in the first place. So ask yourself, are you living inside a prison that only exists in your mind, or are you walking with the one who breaks every chain? When you bring it all together, the message is simple. But it is not easy with God. You grow without limits. Faith is the key that unlocks your true potential, transforming challenges into catalysts for your development. It calls you into a life of continual refinement, where each victory is not a resting place, but a platform for the next ascent. And it demands that you step beyond the walls you've allowed to define you, trusting that the ground will hold, because God has called you to walk on it. This is not the shallow optimism of pretending everything will be fine. It is the deep conviction that with God, even the hardest moments are part of a greater story, and even the smallest steps can lead to unimaginable heights. The limits you've accepted are not the limits God has set for you. So today, decide that you will no longer measure your life by fear, comfort, or the expectations of others. Measure it by the size of the God who walks with you. And if you truly believe He is limitless, then you must be willing to live in a way that reflects it. Because the only thing more tragic than living without faith is having faith and living as if you don't.